I left this file on the Moodle site for you guys to review before class. Did you review it? Sri, did you review it?
I read this.
You read the first slide, or all the slides, or some of the slides?
All of the slides.
You read all the slides, good. David? Some. Dea?
I just printed.
You printed, but you haven't read? Angi? Some. Benny? Some. Tagu? Some. Guys, it's your job to review. Because I come in here and I ask you, what do you not understand? What do you want me to explain in more depth? Okay? Now, a lot of this is review for some of you. Tagu, I don't know if you were around when I gave the presentation talk. Probably not, because I think it was my very first one. Like I gave a presentation on how to present a chapter. This is on how to present a proposal. Okay? Not exactly the same, but there is a lot of overlap. Anything about presentation in general is an overlap. So Sri and Tagu, all of this would be new. For you four, a lot of this should be review anyway. I will highlight, but I'm going to skip over these slides quickly. You stop me if you have some questions, please. So, probably the biggest mistake that everybody, not everybody, that most people make when giving a presentation is they have the wrong focus. They focus on the material they are presenting and they forget their focus should be on the people they are presenting to. So when they get caught up in the material, they get so focused on all the things they know, and they're trying to show the audience, oh, you can learn all this from me. Look at all the stuff I know. And it's detail, 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 detail. And the audience is just going, and they forget everything. Because you've just overwhelmed them with too much detail. So be wary, not too much detail. I explain that when you have a presentation, like for a chapter, your focus should be as a teacher. Even for a proposal presentation, a little bit like a teacher. Sort of a combination teacher, but also salesperson. This is your proposal. It's like you're writing. In a lot of instances, you're trying to convince them to support your project. You do it through your written proposal. You do it through your proposal presentation. At the end of your proposal presentation, you want people to start flashing you money. Okay? Going, say, yes, I want to give you money. Your work looks so important to me. I want to help support your research. Lin, were any of these people flashing you money at the end of your presentation? No, she didn't do good enough. Yes, oh, that's, applause doesn't allow people to pay for research, though. But yes, you're working. Now, yes, it's hard to get the money, and it's only in specific instances. Yes, the applause is good. Okay? And yes, that's acceptable. But it's that idea. It's that idea that you're trying to convince them to support your work. To show that your work is important enough that it is worthy of funding. Questions? General, very quick summary of what I think important ideas, but questions? Okay. I highlight this because I've done it in the past. Quite often often, a lot of people like to show an outline. Almost second slide. Title slide, outline. Okay? And the outline probably is something like this. And then my argument, you saw what I have, is I personally think that is a useless outline. Okay? Useless. Doesn't help the audience at all. Because all you've shown is structural elements. There is no content on that outline. And what your audience wants to know is the content of your project. So you need to always, you have to think of content, structure of content, and language. And slides. Okay? Go with that. Your audience is only thinking of the content. So that's what they want. To be presented nicely in all those other aspects that require good structure, well-spoken, well-presented slides. That all helps, but they're not really analyzing that. Okay? They're looking at the content of your work. So when it comes to the outline, it needs to focus on the content. What I tend to recommend, there's not one way of doing this, but what I tend to recommend is give your title slide, then start into background. Start with actual content of background information. Okay? Doesn't need to be a lot of background, but start there. Okay? So you can see here that for my project, the Gero Transcendence Project, okay, I'm indicating I'd have to use animation and do a lot more detail, but I present background information to highlight something unknown. I'm already leaping to my unknown information. I make that unknown information then my outline, because I will say my research purpose, and my research purpose will become my outline slide. Because the rest of the talk is outlined based on that research purpose. Okay? So, I usually, if I can, don't make outline my second slide. It's just structure. Background. Then when it comes to my research purpose slide, I don't call it outline. I don't give it the title outline. I call it research purpose. But it becomes my outline slide for the rest of the talk. Because I will be talking about the specific elements of my project relative to my research purpose. I finish off the general structure of my talk right here. Any questions? As I showed, this was for you guys to review. Any questions? You're still, either you're confused, didn't look, or you got to take some time to think about it. Go home and maybe ask a question next week. Okay. I highlight some ideas, mostly about figures, because you've heard me talk a lot about story slides and how I like to have these little images with the words. To sort of create these slides that tell a story. Different elements of the story. So here, through example, I have research purpose. I can get to, from there, into some general methods. From there, specific aims that make up my purpose, and there might be specific methods that go along with that specific aim. I can talk about the expected results of that aim. That's my hypothesis, or what I expect I will get from that. And then I can go to my second aim. Notice I will have some different specific methods here. Notice how I don't have all introduction, all methods, all expected results at the end. I try to integrate things based on the story. I take one part of the story and explain it. The methods that I will use, okay, and how I will, hope to find. So that's just a very quick, it's not a full presentation, but a quick idea of the structure of a proposal presentation. Any questions? Yes, Ben.
How many pictures per slide for maximum? Because too much picture.
Too much picture? Yes. Once again, too much information on the slide is too much, but I say there's not an absolute number. Saying, oh, you've got 5 pictures, that's one too many. You have to have only 4 or less. I say it depends what is the story you're trying to tell. And I would say that if it's a complicated story, like very complicated story, start simply. Like start as simply as possible, and you can build that story with more detail. So you can get to a final slide that might be very complicated with a lot of images, but you've built it up so people have picked up little by little, and they will understand each piece at a time. Don't show the very complicated slide at the beginning. You do need to show something. So you do need to indicate some background information. Once again, that's probably too much for one slide, even though there might be less pictures. I might want to break the background into different parts. Talk about the elderly in the institutions on one slide. Talk about the idea of these people and the poor gero-transcendence perspective. Once again, I need to be careful. I don't start a new story. I want to integrate what I've already talked about. And then I can indicate that there is some unknown information, because that's the crux of leading to my research purpose. I would say that, now you can argue here, my research purpose to a certain extent is my story slide, or my final summary, okay, is my story slide. Now, if you look at that summary, and you look at that research purpose, I would say it has less detail. I could be wrong, I haven't counted. But I think it has less detail than, for instance, some of my specific aims. Either the methods or the results. Like, I put on what I need, but understand that probably, if it's a very complex slide, most of what's on the slide is not new. I've built on it, I've added to ideas. And I can use animation to control. So first thing they see is what the audience already knows. Then I go, click, animation, something flashes. That's the new part that I explained that gets added in. But they see it being built up if it is complicated. Does that I didn't quite directly answer your question, but I tried to address it if it gets complicated. You need to have on the slide what you need. Or, actually, that's a very poor way of saying it. You need to have on the slide what your audience needs to understand what you're telling them. It is possible to have too much, it is possible to have too little for your audience. Any other questions about that? Very quickly, just some ideas on slides and use of data. I don't know if you guys will use data. Most likely the data will only be in the background. Yeah?
Sorry, I'm going to come back in. I'm going to get to the
example.
When we want to divide it, because you're making it in one slide, if we want to divide it into 3 slides, how we make a connection in it? So
once again, it depends how you do it, but use animation. Like for example, for the background, I either break this up into maybe 2, 3 slides. I have one slide that only has this top part. This part is blank. Next slide, either this is deleted and this becomes new, although be careful of that, or maybe I have this, but I de-emphasize it. I might make the arrow gray, or I might put like just a gray rectangle. I can still see what's behind it, but it de-emphasizes. Also animation, if I de-emphasize, but just by animation. So the slide, I'll go click. The audience won't see a difference in the slide, but I'm on my second slide, but the audience doesn't see a difference. Then I go click again, and all of a sudden animation disappears. That gets their attention, and I focus on that. There's different ways to de-emphasize what you don't want them to focus on, and to emphasize what you do want them to focus on. And there's no right way, but it's how you want to do it. And I don't have an answer. My best guess is if you have the time, and you guys have some time to practice in this class, try different techniques and ask your audience afterwards when you examine the presentation style, what if they liked it, didn't like it, if something might be better. Try some different options and see what works well or doesn't. There is no one right answer. Does that help? Anything else? So some ideas, okay, just general ideas about the slides and presenting. Preparation is key, okay? Now in this class, or this course, you're actually very fortunate in my view. You might think, oh, it's a lot of work. But you're very fortunate to get the opportunity of formal practice, to make yourself practice. Because sometimes on your own, it's hard to make yourself practice and practice well. In this course, you're made to practice well. Because you literally practice in front of an audience live. And that's the best practice. Now, there are actually, what I've seen, two options to structure your proposal. One is to organize it based on the science story. And I think very quickly last week we talked about the difference between science story and project story. The second is the researchers, based on the researchers' tasks they have to do, which is pretty much the project story with maybe a little bit more, just a little bit extra. Now, I have a certain preference. I prefer the option one. Okay? I prefer to organize and structure your talk based on the science story. Okay? That's my bias. But I would be lying to you if I did not tell you I have seen some very good proposal presentations that organized it based on option 2. And I did not see Lin-Lin's talk today. I've seen it in the past. If she gave you the same talk I've seen in the past, I would say, in fact, there's almost a third option I don't think of, which is a little what Lin-Lin does, which is kind of a hybrid of those two. I would say most of her talk is based on the science story, and there's certain parts in the methods she actually gets more to like option 2 a little bit. So you've seen some different things you can do. I will give you my advice. It's advice. You decide what to do with it. Now, this is not a complete presentation. It's just to give you a rough idea of how to structure this. This was, for those, I don't know if you know her, Lin-Lin, I'm not sure, you may know Neural, who was, Dr. Yen was her advisor. Neural? No, she was like the first group of students. Sorry, it's the name. Yeah, you guys give me an abbreviated name, it's the only name I know you by. Okay? You talk to one another and go, I've never heard of that person in my life. Yes. So this is ideas from Neural's talk, where she was looking at chronic kidney disease patients on hemodialysis. And sorry, I just looked at this and realized my animation is poor, so I still haven't fixed my animation. I should go back and do this. But she was looking at factors that influence a negative quality of life in chronic kidney disease patients. Okay? Specifically, Indonesian chronic kidney disease patients on hemodialysis. So, there are potential cultural differences. It's where not everybody all has the same factors. So that's why it was useful to focus on Indonesian chronic kidney disease patients on hemodialysis. But this is background story. Okay? And in fact, for Indonesians, this is unknown information. Study's never been done. But that's what she's going to look at. Okay? So, different cultures, different factors can be involved. No one specifically looked at Indonesia as a culture. And what are they? That's the unknown information. No matter what the talk, option 1 or option 2, you would have this, because this is background information. Research purpose. No matter what the talk, you have this, because you state your research purpose from your unknown information. So you know for Indonesian chronic kidney disease patients, there are factors that are affecting their quality of life. You intend to use a revised version, the one that's been translated into Bahasa, but a version of the KDQOL to help you determine what those factors are. That was Neuro's project. Okay? Now, different options from this point on. Option 1, which focuses on the science story, you have your research purpose. If you have specific research aims, you can break them down. Okay? Aim 1, aim 2, aim 3, and you have them. Okay? You can start beginning with some general methods, probably starting with your subjects. Okay? Who are your subjects? How are they recruited? Once again, it's still methods, it's heavy methods, but that's most of your project proposal. So the instrument in general, what is the KDQOL, and what are you doing to get the revised version of it in Bahasa? You can then look at the quality of life and the factors through assessment. So, you're assessing the connection there, like which ones actually are present and how strongly are they there. Okay. And then linking them, okay, to what factors related to certain aspects of the quality of life of those patients. Okay? You can highlight specific procedures if you have them, and you can then express your expected results. Okay? So how you collect the data and analyze the data, and once you do that, what is your hypothesis? Or hypotheses? Plural. Okay? What do you expect to find? And then you can finish off with why this project is important. So you can get into the analysis, okay? Like the details, like what statistical tests, what do you actually compare? Okay? And you finish off with your conclusion. Okay? Sorry, I went over that pretty quickly, but it's this focus on the science story. Always use your science story slide as your guide. The alternative is more like the project story, but it's an expanded. It's just what are all the jobs you as a researcher have to do. So you tend to see the first thing they have to deal with is convert the instrument. So they talk about that. They have to get IRB approval. They talk about that. Start recruiting subjects. So the order is different based on the actual temporal sequence of what you do. So then you would go, you could have that as sort of as an outline of all the general steps, and then the specifics for what you need to do at each step. Okay. Now, I've told you I prefer option 1. Here are, to me, the advantages. It forces you to actually think based on your scientific story. And I said that understanding your scientific story is key. And what happens is too often students get caught up in details and only think of their project through the project story, not the science story. Okay? So, for me, it's a much more natural transition from the research purpose to use your science story. It's also a useful template for later presentation. So, at some point, I'm assuming, you will get some information, you will write your thesis, and you will defend your thesis. Get your degree, and go home. That's what you want.
Yeah.
Now,
You do it.
if you use a science story for your proposal, it takes very little to convert it to a thesis defense presentation. The organization is basically the same. You go through the same structure, you have most of the slides created. Instead of expected results, you may have a little more detail on methods, but then you can go through your actual results and explain them and your conclusion. You would never use the research task template for your thesis defense. You would never stand at the end and said, oh, back in September I got my IRB approved, then I did this, then you would never use that for your thesis defense. So if you want to practice for your thesis defense, if you want to have something that may save you some time down the road for your thesis defense, the science story organization is better. As I said, I've seen some very good research task structured proposal presentations, but I will highlight some disadvantages, because if it goes wrong, there are some big problems. You have to know what you're doing to give a good proposal presentation in either one. But what could go wrong for the research task structure thing is it's easy to make a mistake with timing. What do I mean? Well, unless you really understand the process, and I'm going to argue that you guys do not really understand what's involved. If for your schedule to work out well, you need to get an IRB approved in 2 weeks, that ain't going to happen. And it looks poor if you say it. You have to know how long each step takes in a realistic way. You have to understand the whole process before you've ever done it. Because you need to explain the timing of these things in this, when you use this task, this structure. It's easy to lose the story connection, the science story connection, because as I said, you're all focused on project story.
Yeah.
Even more specific than that. So now, when you get to the very end and you have to make your conclusion about why your project is important, it's not a natural transition. It's a little bit difficult unless you really understand your story. Okay? It can be difficult for your audience to follow your project because you're going through what you do in the process. But they have to think about everything at the same time. So when you talk about instrument, when you talk about subjects, if there's too much time, too much detail in between, and they've forgotten the connection, they will forget a lot of the details. The science story is a little bit easier to keep reminding people what you've already told them. Okay? And I've already told you this. It's only good for that proposal style presentation, in my view. So, and I'm really, biasing you towards the science story, but I need to tell you, I've seen examples, it's where I've seen good examples of both styles. I've also seen bad examples of both styles. Okay? The structure alone doesn't determine whether it's a good presentation, but it can help. You just need to decide. Those options are available to you. Questions? Yes, sir.
In the fact, some people have very tricky for the presenting the issues, like you said, they have focused on project story, not for the science story. And also you have shared to us, you ever seen there is some student who have a good to hybrid. Can you share what is the meaning of the hybrid, and also how do we can proceed?
Well,
because in some people will have very tricky, you have to use this one.
to define it, I'm sorry, Angi, I can't define it. The best I can tell you is if it's what I've seen before, through example, the best thing I can say is Lyndon's example, because I thought she did a hybrid. It was at some point during her method, she kind of transitioned more to focusing on the tasks she would do. But then she came back to her science story at the end. That was key because that allowed her to transition to her conclusion. The thing about the tasks is, and I think maybe, I don't know, did anybody time Linland's presentation? How long was it?
15 to 20.
It was within the 15 to 20 range. I'm going to bet probably closer to 15 than to 20. I bet 14, 15, 16 minutes is my best guess. I don't know, I'm only guessing. I wasn't here, but I've seen her give it in the past. And it's usually pretty tight.
Because we also asking some questions.
No, just the first part, the presentation. Questions can go on after that.
No,
I mean,
it's
it's
just
in the
presentation first.
some quick questions, something, so she explains something.
Oh!
No, I don't think so.
Well, she did, I don't know.
When leaving presentation, they just presentation and the up we have a discussion.
Well, some people, if they're very confident as a speaker, may engage their audience during the presentation. But you have to be very confident and know what you're doing, know your talk very well, because you have to control the time. And
She did well.
yeah, and if you can't let your audience control the time for you, like they don't know the answer to your question. You can't sit there and waste and wait. So you have to be confident and know what to do in different circumstances. But basically, that presentation before the Q&A that typically follows. From what I've seen in the past, actually, Linland might even have been without any questions from the audience. You were actually, I think, under 15, usually 13, 14, is what I've seen in the past. She could actually go longer if she wants. But it's probably a decision any longer, and all she's doing is filling in more detail. And more detail might not be helping. And what she's just doing is allowing for more question and answer time, if she's a little bit quicker. But, back to your question for the hybrid. As I said, from what I remember, it was in part of the methods, she sort of switched to the tasks. The worry, if you go all task-based, and this is where I think the hybrid might be better, is you can get caught in talking about too much detail. Because as we just said, too much detail doesn't help your audience. It's just specifics. You can save a lot of those details for possible questions that they ask. Don't drown your audience in details. And the task-based structure, if you go all of that way, be careful not to have too much detail on each step. Enough to show that you're knowledgeable. You have to understand what is the important detail and what is not so important at each step, so that you definitely show all the important information. And if for the sake of time, or not giving too much information to your audience, you don't put the unimportant information. But you need to know what is most important and what is of secondary importance. But as I said, I don't think of it that way, and I probably wouldn't organize my talk. But as I said, of Linland's talk I've seen in the past, I thought was a pretty good example of mostly science story, and at times a pretty seamless switch, but she definitely went task, a bit task-oriented when it came to methods. Key parts of the method process. It seemed easier for Linland to explain it based on a sequence of events that she would do, not necessarily the order that the science story dictates. It just made it easier for her to explain. And I think it worked fairly well. Once again, how to do it, Ungi? You've seen some good examples. If we had a chance, maybe see some bad examples to see what the difference is. I don't have a bad example here at the moment. But also in yours, practice. No offense, guys, but my best guess is your first presentation you practice here will likely be horrible. Don't worry. But also don't relax too much. Really analyze it to see what you can fix. And don't try to fix everything. Try to fix what you need to, what's most important to fix first, and then work in details to get better and better with practice. I might have brought it up a little bit later with some of the issues, but something I noticed in years past, and Linland, you can add if you think of something else or see it a different way that might help them understand. What I've seen in the past when students do their practice presentation is, quite often, first presentation, they have no concept of time. We give them about 20 minutes. A lot of them are about 17 minutes, and they haven't gotten out of background information. Because they've gotten 4 different stories. They've stopped, started, trying to get every piece. They're literally trying to do their literature review in their proposal presentation. It doesn't work. You just need some key background information to develop a single story, not different stories. Issue 1 that I've seen in the past. Issue 2, after that first time, okay? After we've said and gave them advice that they probably spent too much time on background information, they also get questions from the audience. So the audience asks them questions, and they answer them. And they think about that. They go, oh, that was a question from the audience. I gave the answer, but that means that information wasn't in my talk. So now for the second time they put their presentation together, they actually add, not take away, because they're adding based on the questions they were given. You can't have everything in the talk. You have a very good proposal presentation to convince, understanding there's not everything in there, but there's always the chance to answer questions the audience has, to provide the information you do not present when they ask it. Be prepared. You get better prepared to know what those questions are so you can answer them. You could have extra slides after the thank you of extra information if that helps you show if somebody asks a question. But don't get caught focusing so much on background, it takes up all your time. Second, when it comes time to review and you had all these questions, if all you presented was background, your questions tend to be about background, and then you want to add more background because you're trying to address all the questions people ask, that's a trap. I just give it to you, I've seen it in the past, try to avoid. So I understand, so you practice, and it's okay if you fall into the trap, but hopefully somebody, and hopefully then you will identify, I fell into the trap. Now you have to know how to get out of it. Okay? Understand, most important part of your proposal presentation is the project. Any other questions from this? Okay? Now, that's what I gave you on the Moodle. It's up to you in the future, guys. Remember, I come in. You tell me what you don't understand. Now, I do have an extra one I did not put up, but I will. Okay, I'll add this to Moodle. If I forget, you tell me. But some specific issues. And I've probably shown you some of this in the past. Okay? I've already shown you this slide. Okay? Shown you this slide. I've given you this example just as a reminder of like it's taking your audience on a journey. Whether you write or whether you do an oral presentation. It's to remind you, content is basically the same, with the one difference being there's more content in the written part. But that's because you're not there to answer their questions. Okay? When you present, you are there to answer the questions, so you don't need every piece of information there. You just have to know, you're just there to answer what they do want to know. So I give that example. Advantages and disadvantages for both styles. They have their pros and cons. Okay, so remind you of that. Now, figure with words, best way to tell the story. Okay, reminding you how the story slides can be useful throughout your talk. Avoid having only pictures. I probably showed you this before, but just a reminder. When I show my story slides, people get so caught up, they see those little icons, those little images that I usually find on Google Images. that they focus all their time on that, that they make a slide like this. And I would ask you, which slide do you prefer? This one or that one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much more effective this is when you actually have the words. Now, the words just aren't on the slide. The words are integrated with the picture. That's the ideal thing. But you need the words, the term for the concept, and the picture to really make the idea clear in their mind, so there's no guessing. Second one, it can take a long time to choose good images. So I think, I'm not sure I've shown you this before. So this is sort of an over-exaggeration of someone's earlier work, okay? Where they were looking at finding factors in home care nursing that influenced Alzheimer's disease. So fine, they got an image of a nurse helping somebody. And my question is that a good picture of home care? Home care nursing?
It's
No.
improbable.
Is that a good picture of an Alzheimer's patient? I'm not saying the person doesn't have Alzheimer's, but that's not your typical Alzheimer's patient. Now, see, they saw nursing and picked a nursing picture, but you might take some time to have a picture that truly represents what you want. The stronger, the closer the connection, the stronger people will understand what you're talking about and not confuse them. And it takes time to find good pictures.
Obviously.
And also, when we search on a Google image, is that okay to put on?
I do. I save them and put them on and integrate them.
Okay.
You can ask Lindland. She used story slides. You know where
Yeah.
you'd ask her where she got hers. I will use like PowerPoint itself, like drawing features of PowerPoint, like all the arrows and everything else and the text. You know, you use what works. The idea is to make your message as clear as possible to your audience. Whatever works best for your audience sake. Here's stuff, if you use data, I don't know if you will, but some people in their background, the easy thing is to just copy straight from an article, but that is poor.
Yeah.
It's hard to read. Even if you just copy the image you want, it's still hard to read.
So,
Recreate the figure yourself and you have a lot more power. You can organize the bars. This is this. I deleted one bar and I put the bars in a different order that makes better sense for the story I want to tell. I can use animation and just show this bar, click, just show this bar, click, just show this bar. Text, easier to read. So, I go to this graph, and I just take a ruler. And I put the ruler there, and I guess what's the value on the y-axis. And I'm thinking, 292, 295? Close enough.
yeah.
You know, there it is there. It's not the exact same value. That bar is damn close to that. When you look at it, you're not going to see a difference, that bar and that bar.
But is it valid, Paul?
Who cares? I'm not doing statistical analysis on that. I'm showing something to my audience that I want them to understand.
On the point that
Yeah. What's important is they see this difference and they see this difference. That's what I want to highlight and reflect that it's true research data. That's what I want to show. And I can, so I do a ruler for that, and I do a ruler for the error bar, and I use a graphing program to create the graph, and then import it into PowerPoint. The particular program, if I can get access to it, sometimes I can't, because I'm lazy and cheap. But if you know it, Prism,
prison.
it's just a graphing program, graphing statistics program, simple graphing statistics program. Prism. You can ask around in your group, see if anybody has a copy of the file. It's pretty common. You know, like SPSS, I think, has some graphing features. Excel has graphing and stuff, but I don't like them as much. Like SPSS, much more powerful statistical tools. Graphing features not too good, in my opinion. So I get something that has better graphing features if I want to create a nice graph that's easy. I'm going to skip this, guys, for the sake of time. But I usually put this, if you receive resistance saying, okay, Paul, in your class, I give you a presentation your way, but for my advisor, I'll do the old way because that's what they want. That's my response to that. If you want me to talk about more, ask me, but for the sake of time, I'm going to move over or move on.
So you know.
This technique can be very powerful. I especially do this for my Taiwanese students. I don't know how much of an issue it is for you. Okay? Hopefully, you will practice enough in this course, you won't need it. Like, I'm guessing, I don't know. Did Linlin have a script today?
No.
No. She knows that talk. You say like the back of her hand. Just, yeah. She could probably sit here and talk backwards the whole talk. She knows it so well. She can speak it forward, she can speak it backwards, she knows it so well. Now, if you're starting out and you're unsure and you're worried you're going to forget something, I tell people, have a script with you as you give a talk. Just do not read the script to the audience. Use the script to just that you read, just to remind yourself what you want to say for each slide. Okay? Questions. Now this is an interesting one. Somewhat awkward, but take some time in your practice preparation and really think, what are the likely questions I'm going to be asked? Write them down, think about them, and then also write down and think about what will the answer, or what answer will I give each of those questions. It takes some time to also practice for questions. Types of questions might be just someone asking you to clarify a concept or procedure. Someone might challenge your use of a procedure, okay, or interpretation of something. Okay. People might challenge more towards the end in the overall project. If you did not do a good job, why is this useful? Why is this important for the audience member? Okay. Those might be the types of questions you get in sort of general categories. Might be variations. When you're asked a question, it's okay to pause and look like you're thinking. Hopefully you are thinking. Sometimes you know the answer right away because you've practiced, but even still, it might be good. Still just pause, calm yourself a bit, and then give an answer in a thoughtful way. You'll hear me pause. I may take some time to walk around to give myself a little bit of time, a little bit of pause. Put my hand in my pocket. I've seen you do this. Show that you're thinking. It gives yourself a chance to think, and also in a little ways shows your audience member who asked the question some respect, as if, ooh, that was a very good question. You can also talk instead of pause or some combination, or you could talk that doesn't really say anything but gives you a few seconds of thinking time. So, thank you for asking that question. That's a very good question. I just gave myself 4 or 5 seconds of time to think. That can be important. Okay? Or if you're not sure, or even if you're still not quite sure, but you want more time, could you say that again? Or could you rephrase that? Or I ask, do you mean this one? As if I'm trying to clarify, make sure I understand your question. You could say yes, no, or no, I mean something else.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay,
I would say though, you need to learn a repertoire, meaning a collection of techniques. Don't do the same thing after each question.
That's the trick.
Alright. Best type of response, obviously, somebody asks you a question, you answer it directly and correctly. Hopefully you can do that. Now, if that option is not available to you, you might need to give a qualified answer. Maybe the answer is impossible to give, whatever they're saying. Okay? You could accept the questioner's position, but for practical reasons you prevent it, like maybe it was an issue they challenged your particular exclusion criteria in your subjects or something specific like that. And you're saying, yes, I understand what you're saying, but if I do what you say, I'll never get enough subjects to actually run an experiment. And you accept that this can be a limitation in the interpretation of your study once your study is done. You can just literally accept that the questioner is right and thank them. I'm sorry. Oh yes, you're absolutely right. I didn't think of that. Okay. Or, you know, they're asking you about some background information. You go, oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I honestly don't know. But I got your email. I'm going to look it up as soon as we're done. I'll send you the answer once I find out. Now, that's okay. Hopefully, you don't say that for every question. At some point, you do have to show you are knowledgeable and know something about the background in your project. Hopefully, most of your answers are up here. Worst type of response is the BS response.
BS.
BS. It's bad language. You did not learn it from me. It stands for bullshit. Yeah, it's bad language. But we talk about, it's when you really don't know what you're talking about, and you just start giving a rambling answer that's, you know, everybody knows in the audience just knows you're making something up because you don't know the answer, you don't know what to say. That's the worst type situation. You're better to admit you don't know and move on. Hopefully, though, don't do that for everyone. And never give a BS answer. Okay? Analyze the presentations that you do give in video recorder. Look at the feedback you get back from your classmates, your TA, your instructors, if they're around. Also, and then read them. Analyze the video record of your presentation. Analyze it yourself. Don't try to fix everything. Identify one or two of the most important issues you need to correct. Work on those. When you're confident, then go back, find the next one or two important issues after that, and work on those. Okay, that's my talk on presentation advice. Questions? No? Okay. If you have them, you can always ask. The issues, this issues one is not on Moodle, but as I said, I'll put it on if I forget. You remind me. All right. Do you want about a quick 5+ minute break?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mantap deh.
Iya. Kita bertiga di belakang mulai kafe. Aduh, bener dia bingung. Dan galau. Siapa yang apa ini troublemaker? Salah diri seseorang. Daerah kemudian langsung sekolah.
Dia mau nanya dong, Baratnya kapan sih?
Tanggal
26 Maret.
sebelumnya jelekan yang kan
Iya, maksudnya dia.
Jadi berapa sih?
aku mau
tak kirim juga ke Prof. Jensen, Prof. Hsiu-ming. Perlunya nanggepin dong, ini tuh ada di jurnal ini juga. Pokoknya semua
Hasilnya juga di itunya.
kalau hasilnya nggak ada deskriptif datanya nggak apa nggak dicantumin. Tapi kalau aku karena di penelitian ini
Dalam
yang ada
capture aja.
tak capture
Ini
itu.
aja.
Kalau kemarin aku ini yang ini terus ini kan hal ini terus
Atau kasih bawahnya kasih apa? Keterangan ya.
enggak
Nanti jelasin aja ya.
iya
Apa sih coba itu mas? Semua kayak gitu.
apa
Buat
ini
besok.
baru buat presentasi data manajemen.
Oh iya iya.
Iya, soalnya punya kan data manajemen.
Nah, kan belum tak gitu ya.
Iya. Ini udah presentasi nggak masalah lah.
Aku yang berusaha sama satu.
Karena kita berdua ini kalau contohnya kita berdua kadang-kadang kita yang nggak tahu tuh sama dia dan kita menikmati ini.
So do you have an advisor?
Actually,
Actually, that's not a good answer.
I sent an
To be
email to
honest.
Prof. Hsiu-ming.
I understand. Is she in town or is she out of town?
Iya.
Is she here
Aha.
in Tainan
Yes.
or is she away from home? Have you gone to knock on the door or are you just waiting on an email?
We have one meeting with her.
You've arranged a meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she told me she will explain to Wendy because at the fall semester, Wendy was not accepted by her. Then
Oh, Benny. Okay, yeah.
at previous,
Advisornya siapa? Dirinya?
so
Dirimu
maybe
sekarang
she will decide after
Sui,
with
Fang
Wendy
Fang
and
Sui.
Yang mana sih?
Okay, there's things there I don't understand. I don't need to understand them, but okay.
Aku member baru.
I know it's hard because these are the potential
Prof.
advisors.
Esther.
Oh,
And I know you're probably a very nice person. This is difficult, but you need to be pushing the issue to get going because like we're already writing, you know, you need to be organizing. You need your project and have a good idea of your project or you will fall very far below. I know, I don't mean to worry you, but like this is the reality.
I sent them 3 set of
Mau
I
jalan-jalan kan ke
was
Bali.
interest with my last
Okay. As I say, I understand. I understand.
Ibu jalan-jalan minum apa? Station. Zah, dia katanya mau nyari jalan-jalan. Ini NCKU ada ke Taitung, Zah. Stres kerja sama
Do you guys still want more break time or do we push on? Push on? Okay. So, there's the homework that I showed you last week. And yes, I admit it, I gave you a lot. And I will probably keep giving you a lot. But, I know. But the reason is, what makes it particularly difficult, like almost like 2 or 3 different things going in like different directions. Because you need to start working on some things. So, I gave you the PowerPoint on presentations. As far as outlines, I didn't really put my outline PowerPoint on there. I'll do that later. I did put the literature review prep outline that we quickly went over last week. And I said one of the things for homework was to, or at least we would potentially look at, is to start, maybe not organizing, but listing the key kinds of information you will incorporate into your literature review. Just to help your search, to make sure you're collecting stuff on everything that you need. So, have some of you tried to work out a very rough literature review outline? Sort of take your research purpose and then break it down to all the different parts of the background for your purpose? Yes? Some? Okay. Good. Why don't you share, show a partner, this is my purpose. Here are the different things the different elements of my purpose that I need to find background information on. Okay? Explain it. As somebody who listens, please read the purpose carefully. Make sure that whatever the person says makes sense. And please feel free, be encouraged to add anything that you think might be helpful as something for the literature review. It is much easier to remove something later on than to write your literature review and then go, oh, I have a whole section missing. Now you have to go back and do a lot of reading and research. So it's better now to have more than what you need. So, as partners, okay, now Sri, have you done it? Yeah, well, Tagu, okay, fine. All right. And I want to quickly talk to Tagu, because Tagu, you weren't here last week. Okay. You two guys, or you two, pair up, talk about it. I can come around. Any questions? You want to show me anything? We can do that. All right, yeah, come on, Sri. Sit. I just wanted to talk to you, because the last week, for the first class that we did, I talked about note-taking for literature review. Okay? I really hope you have a close look at it and talk to your classmates. The reason being is, I don't know if you've changed, but I can remember the last term when I asked you to write up, sort of a quick introduction of your proposal. I saw, yes, it was very well written, but like at least your first 1 or 2 paragraphs, it looked to me like all of it was copied from a source. And you don't do that. Last term that was okay because I didn't mark that. But we talked about last week, we need to understand the process of copying the information from the source. Don't copy the words from the source. So make sure you review that. And if you have any questions, you come and see me, because that will be critical. I don't want to come to you or have to mark some of your writing and then go, this is plagiarism to do, this is not good. Okay? If you've already looked at this, good. If not, you need to catch up. Okay? Suri needs to catch up in the sense that she probably has 3 projects she's thinking about, at least that's what she told me. And we'll have to decide on which one. But look at the background information and start collecting sources and making notes.